Hi everyone, I'm Mandy-Lynn Donovan, and I am your host of Port City Personalities here in St. Awesome in St. John on Rogers TV. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you enjoyed our last episode, which featured Alex McLean, who is the CEO and founder of East Coast Lifestyle, talking about what it's been like building his brand, as well as Shanda and Scott talking about Christmas with the Cops and where to get tickets. Today, I'll be joined by Angela Campbell from Imperial Theatre talking about upcoming shows and past shows. I will also be joined by Julia Tower, who will be talking about her comedy club, Punchlines Comedy Club, past shows, upcoming shows, and what it's been like. Let's get started. Thanks everyone so much for joining me. I'm Mandy-Lynn, your host of Port City Personalities. I'm very excited about today's guest. First off, let's get started with the amazing Angela Campbell. Angela, who are you, how are you, and where are you from?
Hi, Mandy. Thanks for having me. So excited to be here. So great to see you. I'm Angela Campbell. I'm the executive director at Imperial Theatre right here in St. John, and I am from St. John.
Thank you so much. And our next guest is Julie. Julie, who are you and where are you from?
I am from St. John, actually originally Gondola Point, which amalgamated to Quispam, but technically just right outside of St. John. And I am the owner of Punchlines Comedy Club.
Wow. Thank you so much, girls, for joining. Let's get started with Angela. What have you been up to? It's been a few months since we saw each other last. What's happening?
Well, you know what? Right up until Christmas, we were open, operating at 100% capacity, and we were just show after show after show. I mean, it sort of felt like we were in normal times again. I mean, minus the vaccine mandate and masks, but, able to do what we love to do, which is connecting artists and audiences together and seeing artists work again and travel to the province again. It was absolutely incredible. It was really, really fantastic. And since Christmas, we've just taken a nice little winter slumber and waited for things to, get to a point where we can get back to doing that again.
Absolutely. And Julie, what about you? What have you been up to since we saw each other last?
Pretty much the same thing. We had some shows before Christmas, and then right after Christmas, we didn't have anything booked till the 1st of January. And of course, they were announcing the impending, moving to level 3. So we ended up, I was telling Angela earlier, we ended up canceling everything up until the end of March, just because we didn't know how long the lockdown was going to be. There's flights involved, there's all kinds of stuff involved, but we're so excited to be back to level 1 and hopefully even better than that coming up soon. And we're excited to get some comedians here from all over the world.
That's going to be super fun. I can't wait to get into that. And for those that are tuning in, what is Punchlines? When did Punchlines start? Talk us through it.
Punchlines is a comedy club in Uptown St. John. We're located on Sydney Street, right down the road from the Imperial Theatre. And basically, we've been open since 2019, but we basically had to close in February 2020. So short little start, you know what I mean? It was great ramping up. We had some great shows, and then we had to close for 6 months, and then here on out we've had shows since then, but we're excited for things to get back to normal.
Exactly. Absolutely. We're so excited too. And Angela, what is Imperial Theatre? For those who don't know, I'm sure there's not many, but what is Imperial Theatre? What do you guys do? Very broad question.
It is. Imperial Theatre would be sort of St. John's premier performing arts center. So, most people refer to us as a theater because they think of it as a building, but we really are a much more dynamic organization than that. We operate as a registered charity. Not a lot of people know that. And we also aren't owned by the city of St. John. We're actually independent, and we own and operate our own building, and I report to a board of directors. And so, our main mission is to ensure that the people of St. John and Southern New Brunswick have the same access to live performing professional entertainment that you would anywhere else in Canada. That's really what our core mission is. And whether that means we're booking the shows ourselves and bringing them in, because we really do curate a really large season each year, or whether we act as a rental facility for professional promoters who are bringing shows through, or acting as a facility for community organizations like St. John Theatre Company or Symphony New Brunswick or Theatre New Brunswick or Interaction Children's Theatre Company or local dance schools, to have a professional space to be able to mount their own productions and recitals in.
And how long has Imperial Theatre been around, Angela?
Oh my gosh. We originally opened in 1913, if you can imagine. St. John was huge vaudeville hub. There were actually multiple theaters in St. John at that time. And our original general manager, Walter Golding, convinced the Keith Albee chain of vaudeville to invest in building this massive theater here. And he was very good friends actually with another famous St. Johner, Louis B. Mayer from MGM Studios. They were besties, and where Louis B wanted to go off to Hollywood and pursue his career in film, Walter really wanted to stay here and really felt connected to the community and wanted to ensure that Imperial was built. And so it operated as a vaudeville theater for years, and a talkie for silent film, and then evolved into a moving picture theater. And then in the 50s, it closed when the big studios were building things like the Paramount across the square, in King Square, and two sisters bought it, the Davis sisters, and they donated it to the Full Gospel Assembly, and so it became a church in the mid-50s. Yeah, and remained a church until the 80s, when Jack McDougall and Susan Bates went in to tour the theater to look at the old organ, to consider buying it, and were just awe-inspired by the theater, and offered the $1 down payment to buy it, with the promise of $1 million in a year. And they did it, and rallied the community together, and over 10 years raised over $14 million to restore it to what it is today.
Wow.
And yeah, we reopened in 1994, May of 1994, and we've been operating, well, this is our 28th season since we reopened.
Yeah. Wow. And Angela, what is your job at Imperial? I know we can't really sum it up because you're a little bit of everything. I know, but what do you do? Like, what don't you do? Should we ask that?
I'm just really grateful that I have such a fantastic team. So my role as executive director is that I oversee all operations of the theater. So I am responsible for booking. I'm responsible for our budgeting and financials. I'm responsible for all of our advocacy, for our staff, and for care of the building. I mean, we're actually a registered Canadian heritage building, and so that in itself, just the upkeep and care of the building itself is it's a really big job. So I get to do all of that, but I do it with an absolutely incredible team of experts. Thankfully, I don't have to be an expert in each thing. I just need to make sure that I have the right people in place to be able to advise me to do the right things.
No, that's perfect. That's a good way to sum it up. I know. I know. And Julie, talk a little bit about how Punchlines got started at your location. What did the building used to be? Anything like that?
The building actually is owned by Pam and Kevin Dobson, and they're wonderful, wonderful people. And it used to be Studio 54 Dance Club. It used to be all kinds of dance clubs over the years, and it actually still is technically Foundations. They do have some private parties in there and some kind of events like that here and there when we're not doing comedy shows. Wonderful, wonderful people, and they have an amazing staff that works for them. And they have an amazing bar manager, Jenny Gillingham, and her and I work very closely together all the time for all our shows. And, most of the time the room isn't set up for anything other than comedy. And so it's not an open bar to the public, but it used to be. It used to be one of the most happening places in Uptown St. John. I mean, really, if you think about Studio 54, it was back when Gargoyles, and I'm talking in the 80s when, we were just
That's right.
out of high
That's me and
school.
Angela's jam. That's our jam. We're with you.
It was the best place to go other than the 3 Mile, right? So
That's
so it's really, right. So it's really cool to be in there because it's very nostalgic. And I think, wow, how did people not trip and fall up and down these stairs when they were, young and drinking and all
We
those
did.
Yeah, I have. I was just thinking that.
He's like, I have too, maybe a few times, but yeah. But my husband built a beautiful stage. The one that's behind me, he built that, and he did all that work to that. And then we got a bunch of, we set it up as a comedy club, and we've had a lot of comedians come through town and say it feels like a comedy club from New York. You know what I mean? Because it's got the different levels still. It's just a great place, a great venue for anything like more intimate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
And I think when I was there with Nikki not too long ago, wasn't she trying to sell the wood off the stage?
Oh,
She was thinking we'd get a good, yeah, she was
She
thinking we'd get a good premium for that.
Yeah, she's
Yeah,
touching it.
yeah.
She's like, these are usually fake wood. This is real wood. She's like, way to go, Dale. My husband,
Yeah,
right? So it was exciting. It was exciting. She
She
was
wanted
fabulous.
your stage as a form of payment instead.
She did. Yeah.
That's
She
premium
did.
wood.
Yeah.
That's big money now in New Brunswick.
It is.
That was when were $8.99 or something.
Okay, but
Crazy.
talk me through that, Julie. So how did it get started to open this club here? And walk me through that, because laughter is such a great thing. And yeah, talk us through
Oh,
that.
it's wonderful. So yeah, back in 2019, when we first opened, I met with the manager, Pam and Kevin's manager, Dave McDonald, and he was like, we have this space. And back then, Shane and I, as you know, we had Chuckles a long time ago over on the east side of town. So for moving uptown was such a huge thing for us because there's such a better market for entertainment. You have the Imperial Theater, the BMO Theater, like there's so much going on, right? So it's such a better place to be than the east side of town. I mean, I love the east side, but still it's not the entertainment capital, you know what I mean? So walking distance to everything, that's what people wanted. So when we met with him and we seen the room, we were like, this could be amazing for a comedy club. And they were all on board for it. And, we did a lot of renovations. We only had 3 weeks to do renovations before our opening show, which was a sold out show. We had Rob Ross as our opening headliner,
Right.
and people from all walks of life everywhere. It was just amazing to see such a full room, and like I was telling Angela earlier, our seating is very divided. So we do it all by tables as opposed to rows. So, as you've been there with Nikki, it's nice to have sit people with just their friends and just people they're come with or whatever. And if you have a large group, you can still sit them all in the same section, maybe not all at the same table, but people just love it. They love the intimacy of it. They love being close to the stage. They love being close to the comedians. And we have a whole VIP section that is just directly right in front of the stage. And, we have customers that just buy those specific tickets because they want to be that close and up close and personal. It's lovely. We love it. Love everything about it.
And so I'm super excited that both of you have joined today, because you both are doing really great things right now, which is helping folks get out in the community. Also, Angela's very passionate about entertainment. You're very passionate about entertainment. Also, both of you are very passionate about inclusion. Talk a little bit about, and you can start and then maybe Angela can build off that, but talk about why comedy is important and why it's important now and why it was, I guess, even pre-pandemic, Julie.
Oh, I think people need to laugh. I think when you laugh, especially at a live comedy show, there's nothing different. Like, and Angela can say this, there's nothing different about seeing anything live, whether it's a ballet, an opera, it doesn't matter what it is. It's live is just live. And so when you're standing there and the comedian is only 10 feet from you and you're laughing with a group of friends that you feel really comfortable with, you can actually open up and just let some of that joy out. And I think people really need that. I mean, even pre-pandemic, live comedy shows have been going on for years. There's tons of clubs in Toronto and all over the world. There hasn't been very many here in St. John. So we're excited to be the only comedy club in New Brunswick, really. So it's very exciting for us to have that and to be able to bring people. And I tell people, we bring people in from all over the world. So you're not just seeing someone that's just local. You're seeing local acts on the show, of course, and people from Halifax, PEI and Moncton, etc., on the show joining the headliner. But a lot of these headliners are from Ontario. We've had some from Los Angeles. We've had some from the UK, like literally all over the world. So to bring them in, and you've seen that guy on TV, like Derek Seguin, you know what I'm saying? Like you had Derek Seguin on the show too. So, and Nikki, like she's right here, a commodity, and it's like she's one of the funniest people in Canada, in my opinion, right? And so, yeah, I think that people need to get out with their friends and laugh, but feel comfortable at the same time. You know what I mean?
Angela, can you build off that? Get out, have a good time, and feel comfortable is what Julie's saying.
Yeah, I think, well, I think, Julia, you're referring to feel comfortable with protocols in regard to the fact that we're living in a pandemic right now.
Well, I guess, yeah, exactly. I think that's what it has to do with the pandemic, feeling comfortable to be able to loosen up and enjoy yourself with your group of
Right.
friends as
So
well.
like
You're not
creating
just pandemic
that.
safety, but creating that environment for yourself that you can just let loose and have a laugh and let it out and not feel like you're just sitting there watching a show and you're just not going to laugh out loud. Do you know what I mean? Like as if
Yeah.
you were in your own home. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, creating a safe space for people to be able to, be who they are and
Yeah.
enjoy that. I agree. It's you know, uh, uh, during the pandemic, I mean, obviously digital technology was so important for all of us to stay connected. I mean, here we are,
Mhm.
we're in level 1 and we're still connecting digitally as
Right.
opposed to in the studio like we would have pre-pandemic.
Right.
I love that. Like I love that it's made us shift and it's made us rethink about how we can do things and how we can do things better. I know I've gotten much better at being myself in a digital format than I did. Like this would have been a very different conversation if it was March 2020. Right? Like but that being said, to Julie's point, we're social by nature, that's who we are. The arts are, they arts and entertainment give us the opportunity to express ideas and emotion and tell stories of things that have happened or the things that are happening, and maybe dreaming about what the future could look like. And it's sort of intrinsic to all of our cultures. And so when we're
Mhm.
talking about inclusivity, no one should be left out of that, that opportunity and have access to that. So that's what that's really what drives us. I think it's interesting too, we're living in this really like politically charged time where comedy seems to
Mhm.
sort of be like, there's a lot of conversation about comedy and the evolution of comedy and where it's going, based on the its essential nature, just the
Definitely.
idea that we have a larger responsibility now to think about how we're telling these stories, and how we make fun of ourselves and how we laugh at ourselves, and so it's been interesting to watch that conversation unfold. And also from someone who works in the arts, I get really nervous, and Julie, you probably feel this too about
Definitely.
I don't like the idea of sanctioning or talking about freedom of speech and how we do that, and yet how we do it also and be accountable for what we're saying and how we're saying it. So
Definitely.
I think there's and I'm sure that you're feeling it as well. Um,
Mhm.
so, I think about some of the great comedians like the Jim Jeffries of the world, who have just mastered the art of tackling really, really divisive topics
Yeah.
in a way that allows us to laugh at our own idiosyncrasies,
Mhm.
about how ridiculous humans are. Like, we're like the most ridiculous animals on earth, right? Like the most ridiculous animals on earth, and yet be able to do that in a way where whatever side of the issue you are on, you still feel that you're a part of the conversation and able to laugh at yourself or laugh at the other side.
But why is
So
that important?
I think that I think what I worry about when we start talking about you know I feel like because we have, and this is my personal opinion. This is not, I'm not a political expert, first of all, but I just feel that because the digital world has become such a massive part of our day-to-day life, that what it has just become a one-way conversation. So information is put out and it's not a conversation. It's sound bites back and forth.
Mhm.
And I feel that we don't have the opportunity to grow and learn in that kind of environment in the same way that we do when we're experiencing those things in a live setting, or in a group setting when you're with people and you're having a conversation. And I think, the ability to hide behind a screen and a keyboard has enabled those discussions to become less productive, right?
Definitely.
And I think, again, that's just exactly what Julie was talking about, was the idea that, going with the people, if you're going to a show with a group of people that you know well, generally you probably all sort of align in values, right? I mean, it's very rare that people who don't align in values spend a lot of time together. That being said, in that kind of venue, you will become exposed to other people who don't necessarily hold the same points of view that you do. And so you have an opportunity to talk about that, and in a civilized way, right? And I feel like comedy especially really gives us the opportunity to highlight the opportunity for more conversation and to learn, and to be like, I didn't think about it from that point of view. Like, what a great point. And, maybe I'm going to go learn a little bit more about it.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. And Julie, what do you think about that?
I have always said that about comedians. They always tell comedy with a little bit of truth, because their stories are, they can't just talk about things. They usually talk about parts of their everyday life. And so when they're adding jokes and punchlines to that, it's making people lighten up on the subject. But a lot of comedians will come right on stage and say, what do you think about this, sir? And ask whoever in the front row is there, and get a conversation going, whether they're going to make fun of it or light of it, or try to make it a little less serious. That's their job as a comedian. But a lot of them do stem from real life stories, and it's really interesting to hear what they've been through, what their take on something is, and how they find humor in every day. I can't imagine being a comedian writing new material all the time and doing some of the crazy things they do. But I had another comedian friend of mine call it funny bones, Paul Haywood. He would say, well, they just have funny bones. But and he's true. It's true. Like, some people are so serious, and then you have comedians who are most of the time very crazy and lighthearted and, that kind of thing, right? But they're still probably political. They still probably have beliefs. They probably just know that they can't always talk about those things on a platform like the stage at Punchlines or the stage at Imperial Theater. And then you get the ones like Jim Jeffries that just talk about whatever they want, and people come to accept that that's who they are as a comedian. It's very interesting.
And then also, so talk me through the process right now. We talk a lot about this, and you both are responsible for helping put on very big shows, some of the best shows we have in the city, arguably the province. And walk me through that process right now during COVID, because we talk a lot about having to cancel a show or to postpone it. And then we also talk about like what that process is like. But for both of you, I know that whenever possible, it's very important for us to be able to come together. So what's the rebooking process like?
We've gotten really, really good at canceling shows and rescheduling.
Everyone has, I think.
Right. Yeah, I think this year was a little different. Like, I think when we were thinking about it, and Julie, I don't know if you agree with me on this, but back in August when we were starting the reopen process, I was really like, okay, we have to make a decision now. Are we going to double down and like book a year the way we normally would and just hope for the best? Or are we going to continue on with this, sort of month to month booking that we've became accustomed to during 2020 and early 2021? And we made the decision to sort of go, no, you know what, we've got to get back to some semblance of normal. And, when we're booking, when Imperial's booking, we're not booking in a silo. We're part of a massive touring network in Canada. So we're working with the Playhouse, we're working with the Capitol in Moncton, we're working with the Confederation Center in PEI and the Dalhousie Art Center in Halifax. We're building off tours coming out of Quebec. We're building off tours coming up the Eastern Seaboard, when people were allowed to come into our country.
Or when we could leave.
Or when we could leave. I love Canada, but I got to get out of here real soon. And so, when we decided to move in this direction, and basically the entire industry did, what was happening in each individual community could greatly affect a tour. So if all of a sudden Atlantic Canada was going to shut down again because we had an explosion, there could be, 6 or 8 dates that are happening on the East Coast that are now going to impact an entire national tour. Because when artists book, it isn't a show by show budget. It's how many dates over how many weeks and how much total money, so that I can take all these people and put them on the road and pay them and tour them. So the equation is it's very intricate, and losing 6 dates can make or break a show. I mean, I'm sure a lot of artists will tell you that, in a 20 date tour, it's the last 5 dates where they actually turn a profit, right? So, in our level of touring, in the 500 to 800 seat range, right? And so, that's where it gets a little bit more dynamic. And then rebooking them, the difficult part is we'll spend months routing that initial tour and lining up all the dates, because, you've got to line them up in sequence, et cetera. And, finding 20 dates in a row in a time period that works for both the artist and all of the other theaters who are on that tour, it doesn't always happen. So in some cases, we're pushing 18 months to 2 years out. Wow. So again, those artists are really, like when we talk about how the gig community was really affected, as soon as we start seeing closures again, those artists who are just getting themselves back on the road again are now again looking at like not making any real money for another 12 months. Right. So it's going to take us years to come out of this and to see the industry recover to pre-pandemic times, I think.
Definitely.
Yeah. And would you like to touch on that, Julie?
Yeah. Actually, it's funny you said that, because the first show I had booked after when we started to open up last year, and when we went to Green, we started to go to Green, was Derek's again. And everybody, I got emails from people, I got calls from people and said, well, he's from Quebec. And that was such a big thing that he was from Quebec. And I was like, well, if the border's open and he's double vaccinated, don't worry about it. If we can't bring him, we can't. And it ended up that we actually couldn't. They had changed the levels right before he was going to come again. So we had to book him, I think, further out in October, which worked out well. We ended up having James Mullinger instead, which was great because he's local and he was wonderful and he put on an amazing show. And I mean, everybody loves James. So it was great that he could come and do the show. But, therein lies what you were saying. You have it on such a grander scale. I'm thinking I get a lot of emails and I have to change flights or change someone's booking or something, but I can't imagine changing an entire tour. I mean, don't get me wrong. Some of the people that come are on a tour and they're trying to fit a date in to work for them, but not on the massive scale that, your theater would be doing. So it's a little more low key for me that way, but still, even just canceling shows, I have to give everybody refunds. Sometimes if we do a postponement and we're changing the show to a different date, I'll just ask people to hold on to their tickets if they can, probably similar to what you guys do. But a lot of the time I have to refund everybody and then just start from scratch, promoting and selling all over again. So it's a lot of work behind the scenes that I don't think a lot of people understand. You're not just saying, oh, I'm going to cancel a show for a second. It's quite an ordeal. It's quite an ordeal. And the emails that you get, like I said, and answering all those emails, and you're answering them on such a grander scale, Angela. So I
don't know that use a lot of 4-letter words.
Yeah, and not love, right? Yeah. So, doing that but people have been really patient, really understanding. They know that the levels are changing, that it's not in our control. So I'm like you, I book a whole year out. So I have had some people message me and say, oh, well, we're coming through St. John and in whatever time. And I'll be like, I just don't have the room. And we only have 2 shows a month. We're hoping to eventually go to every week, but it's just not in the budget right now. You know what I mean? So for us, having 2 shows a month is great. And we're excited about it and we're ramped up. And I'm pretty much booked till December right now, which is kind of along the lines of what you're looking at. So it's good.
And so what can we expect to see for shows that are coming up? Angela, so how far are you booked ahead right now? And our shows going, what does level 1 look like right now compared to level 3?
We are at 850 capacity. So we're back to full open. You still need proof of vaccine. You still have to wear your mask 100% of the time. Concessions is open, so you can do the, leave your mask on and sip thing. But we were basically in the same boat. We moved about 30 shows, moved or canceled about 30 shows in January and February into later into the spring or into next season. Thankfully we didn't book, like we sort of left March as it was. We were sort of hopeful that we were going to, be able to save March, because it's so much easier. Like, it's easier to cancel a show a week out than it is to rebook something and sell enough tickets for it to be financially feasible for us to do in a week. Right. Yes. So we can't just that switch back on. So thankfully, we've got Ballet Kelowna is in this weekend. So, we've got, big ballet we're really excited about. I've got another big dance company coming in mid-March. We've got the Debaters are coming in March, which we're really excited about. Yeah. Rick Mercer's in, he's sold out. The Bahamas
tickets to that one. I'm so excited.
The Bahamas are coming. I've got Ben Kaplan coming. Ben Kaplan, who I'm madly in love with. Don't tell him, okay? And St. John Theatre Company's back. They're doing Driving Miss Daisy in March, and they're doing.
I saw that.
So yeah, so thankfully the March to June, which is sort of when our season ends, is looking normal. And now we just need to, relay the messages Julie was talking about before, that it is safe to come. That the really strict protocols that we have in place, actually, they are protecting everyone. I was on a call with the Minister of Heritage for New Brunswick, and we were talking about that statistically, I'm not aware of any theater or art, like entertainment venue, that was the center of an outbreak, because we've all done what the government asked us to do, plus we generally took it a step further and made it just a little bit more safe. So if you're vaccinated and you're wearing a mask, the risk is really low of transmission. So
now
we're just encouraging audiences. Yeah.
And that was going to be my question. Okay. And that's really exciting. I think that it's something that everybody's kind of like, oh, this is so amazing. This is happening again, and feeling good about this. So we talked a lot about shows and rebooking shows. Let's talk about some of the most memorable shows. So Julie, do you want to start on this one? What are some of your most memorable shows that you've had since Punchlines has started, and why? Could be good, bad, silly, funny, crazy.
Yeah, silly. I would definitely say our opening weekend was absolutely wonderful. It was so great to see that many people out and supporting us, especially where people didn't even know we existed. I mean, some people still don't even know there's a comedy club in St. John, let alone worrying about us being existing, I guess. We had John Wing, and John Wing is one of my favorite comedians. He's a 35-year veteran in comedy. And he's been on the way back to the Johnny Carson show. He's been on the Tonight Show, like all that stuff. And he was just wonderful, like just a wonderful, wonderful person to have. We've had Rob Pugh, who's also coming back. I'll talk about that later. He's coming back. Of course, James Mollinger, like I said. We've had Derek Seguin, I just love Derek. I mean, I love everything about Derek.
He's a part-time plumber now too, so be careful. He's also a part-time plumber, he told us. So you have to see if he can make time.
Right, he's building decks. He's doing all kinds of stuff. He's doing stuff to supplement the income. And that's another thing. I feel terrible for comedians in general, or people in the arts that haven't been working for 2 years. And they're coming back and they're booking shows. And basically, like Angela said, people need to come out and see them. It's a safe environment. we need people to come out and support every venue that's putting on live shows, including the Dinner Theater, the Water Street Dinner Theater. I talk about them all the time on my own private Facebook page, because I just think it's so important that these people are putting on shows for our benefit. And yes, you still have to sanitize when you come in, and yes, you wear masks, and everybody's doing everything they can to do these things, and get out and support them. Get out and support them.
Absolutely. And so, Angela, your most memorable guests or bookings, and why?
Gosh,
I know it's so loaded. I know. She's like, I don't want to make anyone mad.
No, it's like asking me about like who my favorite kid is.
Kid is. Exactly. I know. I think you're gonna pick that. Yeah, it's obviously the youngest.
Oh my gosh, it's always the youngest, right? Yeah. It's actually the dog.
Yeah.
I don't have kids, so I'd have to pick one of my animals.
Oh my gosh, I have so many favorite shows. I think from a funny standpoint, one of the things that Imperial's able to do, and we're one of the only theaters in Atlantic Canada that's able to do this, is we can actually book really big bus and truck shows from New York. So traditionally we've tried to bring in at least one big Broadway New York musical. And I think it was 2015, we managed to get Rock of Ages and Hair in the same season. And it was just like, my greatest tweet of all time was walking backstage past a wardrobe cabinet, and there's no room backstage when there's a big show like this. And there was a drawer with just a piece of tape on it that said extra G-strings. And so I took a picture of it and I tweeted, I was like, I absolutely love my job.
Yeah, you can't.
But I was so great. Yeah. And that same year we did bring Hair, and it was the original version of Hair. So it actually, I don't know if you've ever seen the musical Hair, but at the end of Act 1, the entire cast strips naked on stage, and they do this very intricate pose at the end. And my daughter Ivy was oh my gosh, I'm gonna say 10 at the time, and watched the show, and she's sitting with me, and we're in the third row, and I turned to her and I can see her eyes are huge, and I said, just think, you'll be able to tell your first boyfriend that you saw your first 6 penises with your mom. So I think that's probably one of my more memorable moments.
She was probably thrilled.
Yeah.
My goodness.
We've had great shows though. We actually had Mike Delamont, who's a great Canadian comedian from BC, in just before Christmas with God is a Scottish Drag Queen, which is a great show. And again, Mike is one of those comedians who really can nuance those really difficult discussions. I mean, and he does the whole show, from the perspective of God. So I received a lot of commentary from people who didn't investigate the show, were just offended by the title of the show, without doing that deep dive into what it actually is, which is really just a commentary again about how stupid humans are.
Yeah, that's where social media can get involved. You know what I mean? That's where social media can get involved, and you're hearing a name and you're not really learning that the show is from a comedic mind. And Mike Delamont is actually coming to Punchlines in April to do live stand-up. So I'm really excited about that. But I always say that he was just at the Imperial doing his God is the Scottish Drag Queen show. And I mean, he wrote that. He's a one-man show. And I think this is he's making a third one or something. It's truly amazing.
It really is. And it's so funny. If you're ever wondering if billboards work, they do. Because that's what people wanted me to take the billboard down. They didn't care about the show, whether it happened or not. They just didn't want the billboard up anymore.
Oh my gosh.
I know. Yeah. And I get it, people get, I actually, I even received a complaint about the debaters a few years ago. The one that,
Really?
yeah, that James Mullinger was in. But ultimately that complaint led to a really, really great discussion between myself and the patron. He just felt that it made St. John look bad and that we shouldn't allow it to air. Not that Imperial would have any any
Right.
say in what CBC
Yeah.
actually puts that out or not. But again, I think that's it. It's just one of those great examples that opened up a conversation. We talked about censorship. We talked about the difference between hate speech and being offended by something. And it's okay to be offended by something, and you don't have to participate in that.
Exactly.
There's a choice that happens there. So
Mhm.
yeah, I actually think Julie may disagree with me on this, but I think I enjoy getting complaints more than I like getting all of the wonderful compliments, because the conversations are usually far more in depth and lead to a much more a deeper conversation between
Mhm.
people than
Definitely.
you
I
know.
agree too. I think that when people complain about something, at least you can give them your point of view and maybe why, in this particular case, why the comedy is that way. Like Mike Delamont is dressed as a woman with a robe and the whole 9 yards, but he's also a comedian. He's doing it from a comedian standpoint of view. He doesn't really think he's God. Like he's acting as a character, and sometimes you have to get that across to people. And even with comedy, it's the same thing. I've had people say, "Well, I can't believe he said that on stage." Well, it's if you don't like it, don't come. Like, sometimes there's foul language, sometimes there's this and that. And I don't censor. I just warn people. We have a show coming up in April called Rank and Vile, and it's with Darren Frost and Kenny Robinson. They're two comedic legends out of Ontario, but it's triple X adult rated, and it will be the first one we've ever had. And I'm excited to see it for the fact that I'm excited to see them perform live, but I also warn people ahead of time. This is triple X that you're buying. I'm calling it an adult comedy show with adult language. You know what I mean? And don't complain about it if you're going to come. You know what I mean? So, for the most part, people are pretty good. They know what they're buying tickets to. And if somebody asks me if there's a show that might be a little less swearing or vulgar words, then of course I can pick a comedian. We have multiple different varieties of comedians coming. So I can pick someone that maybe they would be more apt to see, that maybe doesn't swear or doesn't, maybe is a little more, laid back or whatever. So it's nice to be able to do that. But a lot of feedback. I get a lot of feedback like you do. Just
Well, and
depending.
there's a line that we have to, there's a
Mhm.
responsibility and a line in regard to being offended by something, and then crossing that line into anything that would be considered hate speech or,
Definitely.
blatant racism.
Yep.
I mean, I do think there needs to be accountability for that. And, I want to be clear about that, but, again, yeah, it's okay. People can be offended by things.
Yeah.
We've forgotten that. Like, it's
I
okay
know
to
it's
be,
okay to be offended. Yeah. I
yeah, yeah.
remember when I had Derek here a year and a half ago, he was saying how he stopped doing his peanut joke bit because he does a peanut joke about anaphylaxis. I don't know if you remember that, Mandy, but he did do that, and he stopped doing it because he got a lot of messages from people who have children with allergies, and he would be like, well, I'm not talking about your child. I'm trying to make light of a situation of, like, what do you pack in lunch for your children to take to school, right? Back in the day, it used to be just peanut butter sandwiches. Like, it's just a whole bit that he does, but he doesn't really do it anymore because he himself has said that he got a lot of feedback from it, and negative feedback. So it just, you're right, some people can get offended by something, but it's how far you take that offense, I guess. And whether you're going to lock it in as I'm offended but it's okay, or
Well,
are you going to
yeah,
detail?
it's like the peanut joke is not marginalizing children with peanut allergies.
No, exactly.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
difference.
right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. But yeah, I get not doing it just because you're tired of
Getting flack for it. Yeah.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so talk a little bit about the art form itself then, because that's kind of a great segue into when you're any kind of performance that you're doing, it's an extension of yourself. You're doing something, you're making a show, you're creating a show It's not what you are, but it's what you're doing at the time. So comedy, I guess, could fall into that. Any of the other performances that we're seeing at Imperial Theater, Angela? What do you say to that?
I mean, absolutely. I think, we tend to, I mean, if I'm booking a show, if it's something that I'm bringing in, I've done a deep dive. I've either seen it live
Of
or
course.
I have, I've done that investigation, mainly because, what I'm looking for are, I'm looking for stories that are relevant, to our community and our time, and things that our community needs to be exposed to and should be exposed to. But also I'm looking, and I'm also looking for, can you hold the stage for 2 45-minute sets? Can you hold the stage for 90 minutes, right? There are lots of talented singers out there who, would put me to sleep if I was sitting in that auditorium in front, because they haven't developed the performing side of their career
They
yet.
still have to be a performer.
Exactly.
What is it, Julie? What'd you say? Sorry, what'd you
They
say,
still have
Julie?
to be a performer.
Yeah. And there's degrees, right? Like and I'm sure you see the same thing in your club, is that, when you're talking about musicians, for example, making that jump from being a bar band to sitting, a soft seat venue, it's a very different atmosphere. It's a very different experience. And so, and the expectation of the different patrons, is relevant there. I think, probably one of the best examples I can use is a lot of and not just Canadian, but a lot of Indigenous work that's being created, talking about, the trauma and the stories that Indigenous people, I'll speak specifically of Canada, have endured, is a very, very controversial and triggering type of performance.
Yeah.
So, there's the trauma trigger for people who may have experienced some sort of trauma in the audience. But then there's also the guilt trauma that, white European Anglophones like myself, who, have not reached a point yet where they're ready to, really explore what reconciliation really means, and that kind of triggering experience for them, and what happens when they sit through a performance like that. So it really is a broad scope, but it's important. And so, back to Julie's comment about, creating, a safe space for people to be able to, or a comfortable space for people to be able to enjoy entertainment. Yes, I totally agree with that. I also love creating really uncomfortable experiences for people that make them explore and think in new ways, and learn something that maybe they didn't know before they came in.
Okay, but talk about that. Why is that important to create that kind of experience?
Well, I think it's important because I think it's how we as individuals and we as a society will learn and grow from past experiences and other people's lived experiences.
By being objective.
By being objective,
I think of university. So I think of, when you say this, I think of my time at university. I think of, we're taught to explore things a different way than we were perhaps in high school, to be able to examine something subjectively. Is that kind of where you're going with that, Angela?
Yeah, I think all of us learn in different ways. And I think that, live entertainment gives us an opportunity to connect with someone on a human level, that you might not be able to experience from a textbook or from, even reading a book, right? It creates, like, there's an exchange of energy, hopefully it leads to an exchange of ideas, but you're submerged in their experience. You're right there in the room with them as they're telling you, whatever story it is that they want to tell. And I feel very strongly that, those experiences are as important as coming in and releasing having all those endorphins released because you've been belly laughing for an hour, or you're seeing, your favorite musician, and, it's sparking all of that awesome stuff in your brain when you listen to music, and those memories are being triggered and those emotions are being allowed to, take a forward motion in where you are.
I remember being at the Imperial Theater, seeing the Rankins. I think it was a Christmas show. years ago now. And I remember just the experience of being right in the moment and getting chills on my arms when they were singing, and just, it was absolutely amazing to just be in the moment. I know it's a little bit different than some of the other shows that you were talking about, but being in the moment is so important, so important.
Agreed.
Yeah, we had Maestro Fresh West for first performance. You've met Wes yourself, Angela, and have you, Mandy-Lynn?
I have not.
Have you? No, you have not. Anyway, he's just, back to when I was in high school, it was like, your favorite music tunes and that kind of thing. And when we sold the tickets and had him perform, he came to, so he's like, this is going to be awesome. It's going to be a great little intimate venue for him to do his first show before he was doing the boardwalk, and so on and so forth. And he's just an amazing human person. Like, he's just wonderful, wonderful person to talk to. But when he got on stage, even though we were not in lockdown, I don't remember what level we were in then, but people weren't allowed to leave their tables, but he got everybody to stand up, and it felt like we were finally free for the first time. Like, even though you were standing up at your table, people had their arms in the air and they were fist pumping, and he was rapping, and it was just such a great experience. And then we've had such an experience of Chris Cummings, where, like, you were talking about people being able to hold the room for 90 minutes. Like, both of those experiences to me was Chris doing an acoustic show and just singing all his hits, and I just was singing right along with him. You know what I mean? And I think that's what people like about the experiences on all levels, no matter what show they're going to see anywhere.
Because
Agreed.
you're not just creating a show or having an event or something. So there's a lot that goes into it. And I'm going to ask you both this question. It's not just about filling the venue up, getting the butts in the seats. It's also about, what's the lighting look like? What's the stage look like? There's so much behind the scenes, unless you're actually in the biz yourself, or setting up, or a club owner, or anybody in that, it's not just folks just walking up on stage. There's so much perfection that goes into it. So we'll start with you, Angela. Talk me through that process.
Oh my gosh. Well, we start advancing the show the minute we book it. So we usually end up with a technical writer. So we get lighting plots, technical writers, etc. For us, we're what is called a roadhouse. And so for us, shows come in, they're ready, they're built. We set them up and we roll them. For a music performance, our lighting guy will actually dive into the music a little bit, figure out what the set list is, and then build moods based on, what songs he knows they're going to play, right? And he has ideas for whether it's a rock show or whether it's an intimate night with, just a single musician on stage with a guitar or a pianist, right? And we get to know who the artists are to do that. Some people travel with their own lighting and sound guys, it really depends. But the technical side of it is very, very intricate and is key to, the full experience of the production itself. Yeah, no doubt.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Julie, talk on.
Comedians love spotlights.
They do. Yeah, they do. I get the biggest complaint that it's warm. It's warm in here. It's warm up there. I was like, yeah, but you're not the only person in the room. I know you're on stage and you've got pot lights ahead of you, but it's warm, But I have a DJ Paul Dixon, as DJ PA is his name, and he does all our music at the comedy club, and he's just absolutely wonderful. And he comes in and sets up before the show, and he knows his levels and he knows all his lighting, so he looks after all of that for me. Thank goodness. I can do my own thing. I'm a bit of a multitasker, but that's not something I can do. So if I didn't have him, I don't know where I would be in that sense. But he's wonderful, and he knows to keep the music at a talking level when people arrive, so that they can chit chat with their friends and all that kind of stuff. And he plays excellent music in between. If a comedian requests a certain song to come up to, he'll definitely do that. But for the most part, for me, it's not as intricate as you, Angela, which I'm very thankful for.
Just to be clear, I don't do any of it. So.
And and I've witnessed this with both of you. So we're going to wrap up here in about 3 more minutes, but I've witnessed this with both of you, which this is a perfect segue. after watching, and I know you both very well, after watching all of the work you guys put into the show, my very favorite moment as somebody that's watched and saw is watching you guys at the end of a performance or at the end of a show. I can't tell you how many times I've watched Angela, for instance, where she's just stood there just like totally, I want to say breathing it all into, because I feel like it's still like she's like, it went successful. Like you could feel like her mom in it, like where it went good, and seeing her satisfaction at the end of the show and seeing her happiness for everything that went on. Great, that the show went well, that everything went good, like seeing her. Same thing with you, Julie. You're hustling, going back and forth, running back and forth at the end of the show, like as it's wrapping up, just watching you take a minute to just maybe finally get a little sip of water before you have to do 100 other things. But
Sip of water, you mean wine.
Yeah, or wine. I mean, to each their own. But that's kind of, that's my favorite. I think to see you guys, because that shows you the love and the nurturing and the nursing that you've put into each show. That for you, it wasn't just putting on a show. It was just so much more. Like everybody else's satisfaction was in your heart. And I think that your passion about what both of you do, it really, really exasperates well to other folks.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know I'm like a big sponge afterwards. I'm just pulling in everybody's energy, and that's what's going to get me through to the next one.
Definitely. I'm talking to people at the door and greeting people and saying thank you for coming, and just they're telling me how much they enjoyed the show. And I'm like, that's so wonderful. You get all of that energy from people. Definitely.
I just want one little quick story. We do have a retro film series. So we showed The Big Lebowski a few years ago. I don't know if you're familiar with it. If you haven't seen it, it's a fabulous film. But I sat in the lobby afterwards and watched, 6 perfect strangers who came out and just started talking about how much they loved the show. They'd never met before. And by the time the conversation ended, they were all going bowling together just because and that was if they wanted to end their night. And I'm like, that's why we do it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's just it. So the very ending of each successful show, this is why we do what we do. And that's kind of what makes it so great. So I want to just say thank you so much, Julie, for joining us today. Thanks for taking time to come in. Angela, thank you so much for joining us today. And a huge, massive thank you from everybody in the community for all of the things that you guys do. I know you both well. I know the behind the scenes things that you do that nobody even knows about. And on behalf of an entertainer and somebody in the community, immensely appreciative of all of your hard work, your passions, and your desires to keep St. John alive, to keep the art scene going, to keep the comedy scene going. And I can't wait to see what's in store for us for the rest of 2022.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you so much for having us. Julie, it was great to chat with you.
It was great to chat with you too. I'm looking forward to seeing some shows at the Imperial, and everybody can see what we've got coming up at punchlinescomedyclub.ca or on Facebook. Either way, we've got shows booked all the way up, and so do you at the Imperial. So I'm so excited to see some of your shows as well.
Well,
Thank
now
you
I
so
have
much,
to
girls.
Delamont. Thanks, Mandy.
Yeah, I'm really excited for him. Yes. Yeah.